to Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. Today, I'm very lucky to have Dr. Knut Witkowski back with us to talk more about the best practices in times of viruses. Herd immunity. Welcome back to our show, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. What protocol was put in place at the start of the COVID virus, and for what length of time was it supposed to be in place?
In the beginning, there was nothing different about this respiratory virus disease from other respiratory virus diseases. In the last show, I showed the picture by Robert Redfield. Like in many other years, every year has a different color. There were several epidemics during the so-called flu season. In 2019, 2020, the red line, there were 3 epidemics.
And we didn't know about it. We weren't aware.
The first was influenza B, the second was influenza A, and the third was COVID. And COVID was not more dramatic than the other 2. In fact, there were fewer people showing up in hospitals than with the other 2. So there was nothing really unusual, except that the history in Italy showed that it was a particularly bad season in Italy.
What were the people mostly dying of? What was causing them to be affected in New York City? What did those people have in common besides age in New York?
The people who die are not just old. We have seen people who are pretty old, like the Queen in the UK, who weathered Corona with only as a minor annoyance. It's not age per se. It is people who are old, not only old, but also have several comorbidities, who have several diseases, and often have so severe diseases that they cannot live by themselves anymore, and therefore live in nursing homes. And this is why we had in Italy, but then also in the United States, the most death in nursing homes.
And that was a focus, wasn't it, at the beginning of the pandemic? The deaths in nursing homes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Why did we know that? We knew that at the beginning of the disease?
We knew that in early March from what we had seen in Italy. It is not that people across the whole Italian population died of COVID. It was people 80 years and older and having more than 2 severe comorbidities.
More than 2 severe
severe comorbidities.
Such as?
Severe obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart diseases, immunodeficiencies. All of these diseases increase the risk of dying from COVID, and that was known as early as in mid-March.
So did that information warrant an intervention focusing on the entire population? And if not, what protocol do you think should have been implemented?
We should have protected the vulnerable. And everybody who is old and has these well-known comorbidities should have been protected. People should have paid, Uber should have been paid, or any Lyft, or whatever the company is. I don't want to make any advertisement here. So services to deliver food, pick up laundry for people who are vulnerable should have been paid for, to reduce their risk and to separate them while the virus is spreading among the young and healthy until we have herd immunity.
That sounds very much, financially, that seems like an excellent idea, not just for...
It is what we have done over the last 100 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no reason to do anything fundamentally different with this respiratory virus disease from other respiratory virus diseases. In fact, if we had not been able to sequence this virus and say, oops, this is a coronavirus and not an influenza virus, we wouldn't have seen a difference. The phenotype is so similar in many ways that we would have said, this year we have a really bad flu, and that would have been it.
When, according to the chart, when did this virus drop? How long did it take for the virus to drop?
So the three peaks that we have seen, the first was in end of December, the second was in early February, the third was in March. So it takes about a month, maybe 5 weeks, for an epidemic to spread and herd immunity to be reached.
I've seen a lot of people stop wearing masks, going around in public these days without masks. What do you think is the future holds for us in terms of the virus at this stage, or the viruses?
We have had, with all this mask wearing and lockdowns and distancing, social or not, we had relatively little effect of benefit, because the reason was to protect the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed. Now, there are always some horror stories somewhere, but at least here in New York City, the epicenter of the epidemic, the hospitals had the normal stress during a flu season, but nothing out of the ordinary. So the tents in Central Park, the hospital ship, the field hospital for 2,000 people in the Javits Center, all of that was not really needed. It was good to have just in case, but it was not needed. So there was very little indication that there was something fundamentally different going on, although it turned out that certain types of treatments that were early on used, and that was intubation, with intubating people with oxygen, was probably done too often, that it wasn't as beneficial as people thought it would be, that with this particular virus disease, low levels of blood oxygen were relatively well tolerated, so that the cure may have done more harm than good. But things like that can happen if a disease is slightly different and the old experience how to treat is can be misleading.
After 4 weeks, were the hospitals still overloaded?
No. Then it was somewhere else in the country, because the epidemic didn't run everywhere at the same time, and that's normal for a large country. The virus doesn't appear everywhere at the same time. It came first to New York and the Northeast. But here, after 5 weeks or 6 weeks, it was over.
So when the virus rate dropped, what should have happened in New York City, or even across the country?
What should have happened? Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. There is no reason So we knew from what Robert Redfield presented that in April, the number of people showing up in emergency rooms with respiratory virus diseases was already down at baseline.
What is the only thing known to end a respiratory epidemic unless you have the military isolating the population?
Or it affects different population differently. We had in 2020, we had in the whole US 168 people 18 years and younger dying of COVID. So of about 500,000, it was 168 who
Wow.
were children. And the vast majority, some people say all of them, I don't have all of that data, the vast majority of them had type 1 diabetes, severe obesity, heart disease, these comorbidities. Other children did fine.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no reason to close down schools. And also no reason to shut down the economy. In fact, it's counterproductive. We had more death because the economy and the schools were closed. Because we need to get to the state of herd immunity. 60%, 70% of all people need to be immune. Now, if we are isolating the nursing homes, if we're protecting the vulnerable, the virus will spread predominantly among the young and healthy, and very few people will die. If the young and healthy do the same thing as the vulnerable, the virus will spread among the vulnerable as fast as among the young and healthy. Overall, it will be a bit more slowly. But in the end, many more of the vulnerable will get infected, and they are the people who die. So the whole universal mitigation strategy is a strategy that increases the number of people dying. It is not what we are told, that it protects people. No. It causes many, many more deaths. And I'm not an isolated epidemiologist saying that. There was the Great Barrington Declaration.
Please tell us about
where
that.
many epidemiologists signed and said this experiment that the politicians had started in 2020, doing something that was never done before, had never been proven to be effective, where the side effects had never been studied.
So basically, the young people who did die had the same problems as the elderly who died.
Yes.
Obesity, diabetes, coronary heart disease, etc.
The problem is not the infection with the virus per se. The infection with the virus per se, it lasts for 5 days and then a few more days, during which the immune system kills all infected cells. And then it's over. The problem is if somebody's health is not good enough to deal with the huge wound created when the immune system kills all infected cells. If that wound doesn't heal, then the person dies. So it's with autoimmune diseases. We are dying not so much of the external factor, here the virus. We are dying of our own immune system, overreacting.
Overreacting to kill the virus.
Well, the immune system, viruses don't really live. Viruses are being replicated by cells, and they are being taken up by other cells and replicated again. And so what the immune system then does is kill all infected cells. And if all infected cells are killed, the virus is not being replicated anymore, and it's over. People should prepare themselves earlier. So do everything they can to reduce the comorbidities, because people who don't have these comorbidities, they do well. So it would help to reduce obesity. It would help to reduce cardiovascular diseases and to reduce diabetes. And we know things to do that. For instance, fasting is a strategy that helps very well against these common diseases. That's very well known.
Why do you think fasting does that?
Fasting has many benefits. It may help to remember that it's very recent only in human evolution that we have enough to eat every day. Until a few thousand years ago, and that it's a very short period of time in evolution. Until a few thousand years ago, humans were starving most of the time. It was very rare that they had enough to eat.
That's true.
And it's only over the last 4,000 years, if even that humans have enough to eat every day. And we are not really prepared for that.
Is it having enough to eat or the selection of foods we eat?
It's more to eat at all. Until, I said, a few thousand years ago, people would be starving most of the time. And once every while they would eat. And when they were hunters and gatherers, once in a while somebody would kill a mammoth or another animal, and then for a couple of days the whole clan would indulge and eat. But then there was a long time in between until the next mammoth was killed. That was normal. And so it is interesting that in all or most religions, people are advised to fast at certain times of the year, certain times of the week, the month. There are almost all monotheistic religions have these requirements for fasting. And it is obviously that some of our elders, they observed very well, and they saw that fasting was actually good. And so, yes, intermittent fasting is something that would help if because it reduces obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and thereby prepares your body to deal more efficiently with a respiratory virus disease. And for those people who cannot or don't want to do that, we can actually help them to get some of the benefit of fasting by using particular supplements or other forms of nutrition and help them to have the benefit of fasting even if they don't fast.
Such as?
Well,
and for what?
One thing would be alpha-cyclodextrin, that is a dietary supplement that is also in many food that we are eating.
What does that help do?
It collects lipids. And so it reduces lipids in your body.
Why are lipids that so good?
Pardon?
Why is it reducing lipids? Please just talk about lipids.
But if you're reducing lipids, you are having that as part of the benefit of fasting, not having so many lipids.
Uh-huh.
And it also has a more specific function. It improves, it gives cells, if you're reducing lipids and you're also reducing, that is phospholipids, you're reducing the uptake of substrates into cells. So cells take in less substrates, and if they take in less, they have less byproducts to get rid of, and they have more time to clean up the garbage that accumulates in cells. So it's one of the strategies that actually work to reduce accumulation of garbage in your cells.
And
so if you want to detoxify, that is actually not just a big word. This is one way where you can actually help your cells to detoxify.
And what is this thing that you take, the supplement that you're talking about, that helps you detoxify? Would you repeat it?
So it's alpha-cyclodextrin. Alpha-cyclodextrin is a supplement. It's also a part of many of the prepared foods because it's emulsifying lipids. It improves the mouthfeel. It has certain effects that people who are preparing food want. The problem is it doesn't always get into the bloodstream, only if you take it with dairy products. And we found which component of milk helps to get the alpha-cyclodextrin to be absorbed. It's capric acid. It's one of the fats that we have in milk, including breast milk.
Interesting.
So it's something that's not dangerous. Children get that very early on in their life. And so the combination of capric acid and alpha-cyclodextrin is something that is, where the two components work synergistic.
Does someone said that capric acid should be combined with coconut oil or 50% coconut oil?
It is part of coconut oil.
Oh.
Capric acid is part of milk, mammals' milk, and part of coconut oil. And if you can buy it as MCT oil. MCT oil is 40 or 50% of coconut oil. So there's a large percentage of coconut oil. There's a large percentage of capric acid.
Does coconut milk also have it?
No.
Is that different? Mm-hmm.
Maybe some, but nothing to speak about.
Mm-hmm. What is flattening the curve?
This was early on in COVID, after people had seen what happened in northern Italy, noting that Italy has the oldest population in Europe. Only Japan has more old people than Italy. And when COVID came to Italy, then the nursing homes in Italy had a very bad condition, And so that was seen, and then people were afraid that one might find similar stress in the healthcare system in the United States as we had seen in the north of Italy, although it wasn't really likely because the healthcare systems are quite different in the north of Italy and in the United States. The United States has actually probably is better structured than Italy is.
Corey, can you bring up the next diagram?
Now this is a week old. We see the different waves, where each wave is a new epidemic, because each wave over the last 2 years was created by a new virus. And the red curve is always the hospitalization, or orange, depending on how it looks on the computer. And hospitalization is followed by about 2 or 3 weeks by the curve of death. And so we see that every curve, first you see an increase in the number of hospitalizations, and then you see an increase in the number of deaths. So the deaths are the red curve and the blue bars. And that happened over and over and over again. And at the very end, we are the last 2 or 3 weeks, where the number of hospitalizations is increasing and the number of deaths is about to follow suit. So we have a new epidemic, and today, when I came here in the cab, I heard that in New York City, the level of danger is raised again, that people should should mask again. So we are again mitigating and distancing and incubating, trying to flatten the curve that is coming, and in doing so, incubating the next one that will come in a couple of months.
In time for fall.
And we can play that game for quite some time. We have done it now for 2 years. And since we all love that so much, we can play that game, we can continue playing that game until somebody starts, and that actually now do the reasonable thing, what we should have been doing 2 years ago.
Which is?
And that is stopping everything except protecting the vulnerable.
Stopping everything except protecting the vulnerable. Everyone else should continue to live in a normal way.
There was a namesake of mine, and he was King Knut of Denmark, England, and Norway. And he got annoyed when people expected him to be able to do everything. And so one day he went to the shore and told the tide to stay away. The tide didn't stay away. They couldn't care less. Unfortunately, our politicians, they think they can stem the tide of a virus disease. The tide does not stay away.
I want to thank you so much for coming back on our show, Mr. Wachowski, Dr. Wachowski. Until the next time, this is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.